السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. أهلا بكم وسهلا. أعتذر كثيرا عن الفيديو السابق لأن فيه انقطاع كبير للإنترنت. يعني في كل مرة أحاول أن أبث فيها بثا مباشر على قناتي في اليوتيوب، إلا ويحدث فيها انقطاع للإنترنت. لذلك أعتذر لكم إخواني كثيرا عن ذلك. أنا الآن أحاول يعني من جديد البث، العمل على البث المباشر. أرجو أن لا يتكرر انقطاع الإنترنت هذه المرة، وسأحاول أن أختصر قدر المستطاع. So I told you before that the video will be, as you've seen in the title, it will be about how to teach reading skill. Now, I will explain quickly. Now, while students certainly need practice reading, I repeat, I said, while students certainly need practice reading material in English, so it is important that you include short speaking, listening, and writing activities whenever possible in your reading lessons. And the focus of the lesson may be on reading a particular passage, but having a diverse lesson plan uh, will be enable students who are good at other aspects of English to still participate and feel confident in their abilities while they are working to improve an area they are weaker at. Now, as you know, in when you are preparing a lesson, or even if it is reading or speaking or listening or writing, there are procedures, or there are steps that you are going to follow, that you are going to go through them. Okay. Now, we know in general, we know warming up, we know pre, and we know during or while, and we know post. So if it is reading, we are going to say warming up, pre-reading, during or while reading, and post-reading. But for me, I'm not going to work on 3 steps or 4 steps, but I'm going to work with you on six steps. Now let's start with the warm up. Okay, warm up. Now, since students will mostly be sitting at their desks during a reading lesson, use the 5 to 10 minutes warm up period to get students moving and speaking. Now, I repeat, I said, since your students will mostly be sitting at their desks during a reading lesson, now you as a teacher try to use from 5 to 10 minutes warm up period. Why that? To get your students moving and speaking, and at the same time interacting with you. Also, you are going to want to generate some interest in your reading topic, so that the warm up activity flows into your introduction of the material. Now, one way to do this is to have students stand in a circle. So you ask your students to sit or stand in a circle, and ask them to tell you what they know about a certain topic. Now, this way can be as simple as giving you some related vocabulary. After a student has given you a word or a phrase, you can write it on the board, and he can call on students to go next. If appropriate, you can bring a ball. You can bring a ball to class and ask students to gently choose it to the next one or to the next person. This is good because it actually gives students something to focus on other than the words being written, or sorry, other than the words written on the board, which you will be able to review later. So this is concerning warm up. Okay. Now let's go to introduce or introduction. Now here I'm not going to say pre-listening, or sorry, pre-reading or post-reading, but I'm going to say introduce, introduction. It means the introduction of your lesson. So your introduction may have been made quite easy by the warm-up activity. Okay. Now while your students are seated, ask them to use some of the vocabulary they came up with in a sentence, and add any K vocabulary to the list. Okay. Now when you finish that, now you can describe the reading passage and ask your students to read it silently to become acquainted with the new material. Okay. Now this is concerning introduce. I mean the introduce steps. Now let's go to practice, which is the most important. We have practice and practice more. Okay. Now these steps, they are more important than the other ones. Okay. Now uh, practice reading the material aloud. You can do this through a series of steps. Okay. First, have students do some slash reading. I will explain what do you mean by slash reading. You should read the passage aloud, pausing. For example, uh, have your students repeat each section after you and place slashes in their text. Now, a sample sentence might look like this. For example, now for example, we have Maulid Nabawi Sharif, and you want to talk with them about Maulid Nabawi Sharif and what do they prepare in Maulid Nabawi Sharif. So you can say, for Al Maulid Nabawi Sharif dinner slash I at for example couscous. Okay. Another slash, for example, you give them a traditional another name. You give them ask them to give you another name of traditional dish. For example, let's say I don't know, thuwam or tajin or like this, and you give you put a slash, then give another name, then slash, etc. So this is what do I mean by using slashes. Okay. Or passages allowed pausing. Okay. I hope you have understand that. Okay. So let me continue. Now, this way, I mean, using slashes will help your students read more naturally. Okay, it will help them to read naturally and in a way that they can understand. Okay. Now, when you finish using slashes, you can have students read the passage by repeating sentences after you. Okay, and then call on a student to read to read one sentence at a time. If students struggle with the pronunciation of certain words, take this opportunity to practice pronouncing them too. Okay. So uh, you can let's say you can teach them two skills here. First one, reading. The second one, pronunciation. Okay. Now, you may wish to have students read the passage again silently to focus on its meaning before moving on. Okay, so this is concerning produce or concerning production. Now let's go to, sorry, this is concerning practice, okay? Now let's go to practice more. Let's go to practice more. Now, with reading lessons, it is important, I repeat, it is important to ensure, to make sure that students understand the materials or the material as well as any new words. Okay, why that? To check vocabulary, you can ask students to match synonyms, antonyms, pictures. Now if I want to check my students vocabularies, I can give them words and ask them to give me the synonym of this word or antonyms. Or sometimes we can rely on matching. For example, you give them a picture and you ask them to match the word with the picture. There is another way to do that. For example, fill in the gap. Okay, it's a good activity. Or you can give them the activity of true or false. You give them questions, or you give them some sentences, and you ask them to answer by true or false. Of course, these activities are related to the text that you give them. Okay, so this concerning practice more. Okay, now we come to produce. We come to produce. I hope you are watching me. I hope, okay, internet is good. So I continue. I said produce. Now in produce, you prepare some discussion questions related to the reading, and some that require students to use key phrases in their answers, of course. Now, for beginners, discussion will be quite challenging, but intermediate and advanced students will gain a lot from discussing their thoughts and opinions. Okay, and in smaller classes, there will be more opportunities for students to share their viewpoints, while with larger classes, you may simply have to ask who agrees or disagrees with a particular statement, and then call on 3 or 4 students to express their opinions. This is simply how to deal with produce or with production. Okay, now the last one, I hope it wasn't long. I hope you've got some points of. I mean, you've got some points. You've got some notes. Now let's come to the last one, which is review. Now, in review, and I'm talking about reading. In review, you can ask your students to summarize the reading or what they learned in class. Sometimes you can just ask them a question orally, for example, saying, what have you learned? Or what are the new words that you've learned? Or can you summarize what you have seen in today's lesson? This is a good way to let them interact with you, and you check whether they were able to understand the passage that you gave them, whether they were able to understand the new words, whether they grasped the new words. Now, if you haven't already done so, you can also have students search for the topic sentence and discuss why students choose certain sentences, whether they choose correctly or not. Okay, Now, the last word that I want to say, reading is a key, okay? Part of learning. So I repeat, reading is a key part of learning, learning English, and this lesson or these lessons give you an excellent opportunity to introduce topics of your own. Okay, so be careful when you or when you want to select any article, and also it is important that your students are interested in the material, because if your students are not interested in the material, so they will be more boring. Okay, but if they are interested, they will be more active in the discussion if they feel strongly about a particular topic. So this was the lesson of today. I hope you got some notes. I hope it was benefit for you. And I will do more lessons, inshallah, in the coming days. Just I want to ask you to do me a favor, which is to subscribe to this channel and share my videos as maximum as you can. Thank you. See you in another video. Goodbye.